Hello and welcome to that 90s Wrestling Podcast. Today I got a very special guest, one of the voices from our childhoods, and you could say the face of WWE in your house, the one and only, Mr. Todd Pettengill. Todd, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing great, man. Good to be on your show. Appreciate it.
Oh, thanks very much. Absolute pleasure having you on. And mentioned off camera, I had your colleague Shawn Michaels on the show, and it's great having the opportunity to speak to some of these voices from my childhoods. And when you came along, massive fan of your energy you brought to WWE. So the fact that within a year of me starting the show, I've got the opportunity to speak to you, absolute pleasure and a privilege.
That's good. And you're in your car. I wish I knew, because I would have went in my car, and then it could have been, the car interview.
Yeah. Normally I'm in the shed. But that's a shout out to Mags. You'll know what I'm talking about. But yeah, it's weird because we're starting to ease up on lockdown over here now, and things are starting to open up, and we're starting to get wrestling shows over here. So people's asking me if I'm going to go on the road and actually interview people. I'm like, yeah, it's something I would really like to do one day.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
But how's lockdown been over your way? Is it all good now? Everything seems to be getting better?
Yeah, it seems to be getting back to normal, thankfully. It's been a long time. It's funny, I was watching some reality show. I think it was Wall Street. I don't know if you've seen it with Mark Wahlberg. And yes, they were shooting last year, obviously. So it's funny to see the lockdown and have him say, well, yeah, we stopped the movie and it'll probably be 4 to 6 weeks. It's like, yeah, try 18 months. But, I think now that a lot of people are getting vaccinated, things are finally opening up, and we'll be able to hopefully get back to normalcy soon.
Hopefully. So I suppose we'll jump into it, Todd. So before you joined WWE, your background obviously in radio. So how did you get into that?
Well, I started in radio when I was 13 years old. My mom knew somebody at a local radio station where we were growing up, and she said, you got to get a job because you're either going to wind up in prison or, something. So we need you to do something. So, yeah, I started very young in my hometown and did radio for 40 years. So I was actually doing the radio show in New York City, and Vince McMahon reached out and said, I listened to the show. You know anything about wrestling? I said, no, I don't know. He goes, perfect. I want somebody with an outside point of view. This will be great. Do you want to come up and audition? I said, sure. So I went to Stanford and met Vince, and he threw me a bottle of water, and he said, okay, sell it to me. And that was my audition. And I basically learned along the way, but was always doing the radio show the entire time. As a matter of fact, that's why I had to leave and brought in Michael Cole as my replacement. He was also a radio guy. But I was just doing, pay-per-views every weekend and using all my vacation time. So basically didn't have any time off for about 6 years. My wife was like, we got to have a vacation at some point. So that's why I left. We left on great terms, and obviously, since I'm still doing stuff with them and going back. But yeah, the radio has always been a constant. Done with that now, so that was a good run.
Awesome. And you mentioned the audition for Vince McMahon, and I think you told a story actually. Well, I mean, you don't really do many of these podcasts from I've noticed, but you've done one on the gorilla position, and you mentioned a story regarding Vince McMahon straight after your audition.
Yeah, that was the old bathroom story where he was in the stall. Well, I didn't know it was him, but I asked for a courtesy flush, and he thought that was hysterical, and he said, you got the job. So you never know. That's why I always say, be yourself, right? Just be yourself. Had I known it was him, would I have said anything? I like to think I would, but who knows? I probably wouldn't have. So if you're just yourself and you're genuine, sometimes good things happen.
And how was it adjusting to your first couple of days, I suppose, in Stanford and getting used to everything? Was it surreal, or was it because you was outside that wrestling world that you just treated it like another job, I suppose?
Yeah, I sort of just approached it as a TV job, and they would give me the bullet points that I needed. It takes a little while to learn the material and the guys and the storylines and all that stuff, but had great producers there. And Kevin Dunn actually produced Mania many, many times on his own, which was very cool. We got to be very good friends. And it was a learning curve and a process. But when you have good people behind the scenes and they prep you really well, the rest of it I could do, but it was the bullet points of getting all of that stuff right that was a bit of a challenge. But I think it went pretty well.
You mentioned Kevin Dunn, and for one reason or another, he seems to be unpopular amongst, I don't know, fans, but personalities, you could say, like Jim Cornette and such. But you mentioned you're a good friend, so what's Kevin really like behind the scenes? And is he, I can't imagine he's as bad as what people says, but what was your experiences like with him?
My experience was terrific, and people say the same thing about Vince. But remember, when you run a billion-dollar company and you're in charge of production for a multi-billion-dollar company, you're going to make enemies, right? And everyone doesn't have to like your style. But I always like the phrase that, my heart is for my family, my brains and my balls are for work, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, you have to run a business. Kevin was great to me, and always saw his interaction with everyone around him very positive. So I don't know where that comes from. I think people like to talk and say things, and maybe if I was a more controversial figure, but I'm just telling the truth. It was great for me. Both of those guys were just nothing but supportive, and I appreciated everything they did for me.
Yeah. And I mean, the one thing WWE's always got praise for is their production values, and seeing that Kevin's been there still there to my knowledge.
Yeah.
He's been there for such a long time. He must be doing something right.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're responsible for production for that many countries every single week, that's a lot of content to get out, man. So I love him. I think he's great.
Awesome. So your first pay-per-view, WrestleMania 9. So gets a lot of hate online. People's not the biggest fans of it. Me personally, I've got such nostalgic memories of it because just the setting, seasons past. Yes, it was in a car park in Las Vegas, but still, like the ambience of it, and like you on the toga. So, how did it feel for yourself being part of that WrestleMania?
It was a strange experience when your very first pay-per-view, you're in a toga. And I had beer spilled all over me, and it was in the cheap seats, as we like to call them. It was rowdy. But I thought it was an amazing experience. You're right. I mean, the backdrop was cool. We were surrounded by Vegas. And who doesn't, love Las Vegas? So I always thought it was just terrific, especially for me because it was my first one. But the toga was a bit of a surprise. But, what do they say? One in Rome, right?
Exactly. And during the end of the show, Hulk Hogan made his return after quite a few months out. So you kind of saw the very end of Hogan, I suppose. So did you have much interaction with him?
Yeah, I mean, backstage we had a lot more, but you're right. He was there for a short time when I was there. I remember he stuck around for a little while after that, and then the whole, controversy is he back? Is he back full time? It's like people do with The Rock, when The Rock comes back, oh, he's back, he's going to be back full time. But Hulk had an amazing career, right? And it was very cool that I got to meet him, got to know him. Roddy Piper was the same. Came back for a little stint there, and we had some good some good times. What an amazing guy he was.
Awesome. And one of the other people who was on their way out as you was on your way in, and you've been on these podcasts, Shawn Mooney. So how was it having this brief interaction with Shawn Mooney, and did he give you any tips and advice when you walked through them doors?
No, we didn't. I don't know if we even saw each other very much. I mean, we did in passing, but we remained. I think we did some emailing and texting, and he said, "Hey, if I can do anything," which was very nice. He's a great guy, and I did do his show, as you mentioned. But yeah, I really haven't done a whole lot. I thought maybe start doing a little bit since I'm, going to come back and do some stuff. So, but yeah, Shawn was terrific.
Yeah. And I mean, we'll get into it later on, but you've mentioned that you've been making a few comebacks now, and you're doing the NXT in your house. So how's it been like doing them shows and seeing the difference of WWE back then when they was taking the water coolers out the building, sorry, and now today where they've just become this global phenomenon?
Yeah, every business is cyclical, right? You have these cycles where it's up, then it's down, then it's up, and that's a normal sort of evolutionary process for a business. And I think I was there, a lot of people would say it was kind of an important time with the new generation, and it really has some sticking power because there was a lot of amazing things. And then the Attitude Era slowly started to creep in, and that's when I sort of bowed out for no specific reason other than it was, time for me to just take a little bit of a break and, get back to life a little bit. But it's great that a lot of the people that I worked with back in the day are still there. So it's like going home, it's very familiar to me. I'm pretty comfortable doing it. Again, you have to learn the new, the NXT. So I've got to learn storylines. I've got to learn, what's going on. I follow it a little bit, but not as much as you have to when you're immersed in it, So it's fun. I mean, the production value, as you mentioned, is top notch, and I love being associated with that. Awesome.
And one of the big names during 1993 when you came in was Bret Hart. So I mean, he's my favorite wrestler of all time. Well, how was your dealings with Bret, and how did you get along with him?
Bret was great. Yeah, I had really no problems with anybody. 99% of the guys were just terrific. I mean, and if you had somebody who wasn't, it was probably because they were having a bad day. And who wants to be judged by a bad day? So I try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. But really, my job was to put them over, right? Otherwise, why am I there, right? So even if you're talking to a heel, you have to put the storyline over. And if an interview doesn't go well, it's not their fault, it's mine, right? Because I'm the one holding the mic. If they take the microphone from me, now that's different. Then you're on your own. Then I can't help you, right? But if I'm holding the mic and the interview sucks, it's my fault, not theirs. They're wrestlers, right? It's my job to talk, set the line, deliver what has to happen. So a lot of people will say, "Oh, it was a terrible." Well, if it's a terrible interview, it was my fault, not theirs.
Yeah. And one of the
by the way, if this is a terrible interview, I'm just going to blame you. But so far, so good.
Something that wasn't terrible and a very memorable moment was the USS Intrepid when Lex Luger came and body slammed Yoko, and you was there hosting it along with Macho Man. So, how much fun did you have during that day?
I got to tell you, it was about 110 degrees, and on that ship with that paint that would radiate the heat, it was unbelievable. It was packed. You talk about an atmosphere as well, right? You're right in New York City. The skyline is all around you. 4th of July. I think I was wearing my flag pants. I'm trying to remember. But that was absolutely spectacular. I mean, yokozuna, another one who, we miss. But Lex. But what I think the boat shook. I really do. To this day, I think it did.
You've probably heard the story, but Mr. Fuji apparently took away Yoko's sandals, so he had to literally stand on the boat. So I can only imagine what his feet was like.
I don't know how he did it. It was so hot. That's really, I just remember you were dripping sweat just standing. So the makeup people were trying to get this, but at some point it was like it didn't matter. You just went on and did your thing. But that was a real memorable event, one that definitely sticks out for me.
How did Macho cope? Because he had the full hats, the sunglasses, the jackets, and everything,
and didn't sweat a lot. He had a little sweat. I don't know what was going on with him, but I remember saying to him, "Aren't you hot?" "It is what it is, brother. Roll with it and just get her done." So I was dripping. You know how when your clothes are sticking to you, and it was
Yeah.
that hot. And you're right. He's got the fringe. He's got the hat. His beard. I mean, I don't know how he didn't pass out.
Yeah. I'm doing this interview now, and it's probably about 23 degrees. Not too hot. I am sweating.
Yeah.
So I got no idea how
I like it cool.
on that boat. Oh yeah, definitely. Awesome. And speaking of two cool people, you could say Bobby Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon. So did you have much interactions with them? Bobby Heenan, to me, is the greatest.
Yeah, a lot of interaction with both of them, actually, because we're all on the announce team when I was there, and both just such genuine people. And I had more interaction with Gorilla Monsoon, but quite a bit with Bobby, and both guys. We just, the backstage card games and stuff are pretty legendary. And Gorilla Monsoon was quite the gambler. I think I've told that story before. And the first guy to reach into his pocket if anything was happening and pay for dinner, and both of them were just salt of the earth guys.
Awesome. And we mentioned Macho Man, and together the two used to host WWF Mania. So, and I think you've mentioned you have great friendship with Macho Man. So, how much fun did you have with Macho, like filming all this? And obviously, there was the one episode where you dressed up as Macho Man, which I watched today, which I found hilarious. And the one of the backstage hands was called you Todd, and you literally held him up against the wall. It's Macho.
Yeah, and Randy was not generally a fan of people imitating him.
No.
He did not like it, and we didn't tell him.
Right.
So it was, it was live. It happened, and we just wanted to get I said, let's just get a genuine reaction, and if he's pissed, then that's funny too. But he took it really well, and I think because we were friends, and he knew it was, from a place of love and flattery, that he, all right, that's good. Let's take it off. Let's put it away. Randy's flutters were classic,
Yeah. Cool. And one person I want to speak about as well, and every time there's someone from that era, I always ask him for the favorite rib stories, but the late great Owen Hart. Any got good Owen Hart rib stories?
Owen was the thing that sticks out, and again, great interview, right? Over the top performer, terrific. Things got a little heated at the King of the Ring coronation,
Right.
with me and Owen, and where I think, and I'm a little foggy with it now, but I remember, there's usually an unwritten rule that you don't really put your hands on the announcer. At least there was then. And there was some back and forth, and I think he had me kneel, and it was and I did it, but he pushed me pretty good. And then afterwards, I let it all go, because when you're on, you have to, what are you going to do? What am I going to say?
Yeah.
Don't touch me. Don't, you can't be that way. So afterwards, I went up to him and I said something, and I said, look, I don't appreciate it. You don't touch me again, please. And he could not have been more apologetic. I'm sorry, I was in the heat of the moment. I'll never do that again, but those kind of things happen, you try to avoid them, but he was, again, one of the great, man, he could put over any storyline. He was just amazing.
Yeah, that feud with Bret, the jealous little brother angle, went from Survivor Series to the following years.
All you had to do was tag me.
Yeah.
I was trying, just make the tag. I mean, how that classic, right?
Yeah, it was just such a great angle, and not just a great storyline and promos, but the matches themselves at WrestleMania 10 and obviously the cage match at SummerSlam. So just unbelievable talents.
I totally agree. That was some really good stuff.
Yep. So obviously you mentioned while you was part of WWE, you was also doing your radio show. So Were you on many of the UK tours?
No, I
No.
didn't do any of the UK tours because of the radio show. So I
Yeah.
was and when my contract was that the radio came first, obviously, because I had that job first.
Yeah.
So I did miss a lot of fun stuff that I wished I could have, been a part of. But while I was doing the show, who knows? Maybe now I'll be able to do some of that once traveling starts. Live shows are starting up again very, very soon, right?
Yep.
So pretty exciting.
Yeah. And something that was exciting, especially in '95 Royal Rumble, Pamela Anderson, and you was there on the spot, like interviewing her, giving out gifts from the wrestlers. So, what was it like filming with Pamela Anderson? I mean, at the time, you could say, was the biggest star on television with Baywatch at the time. So, did you get a little starstruck yourself?
No, you know what was cool is having done the radio show, I pretty much met everyone because it's New York City, right? So we had
Yeah.
we had every major guest, and we had Pam Anderson on the show before, so I always tried to look at it like they fart too, and I think if you remember that while you're working with somebody, it helps.
Yeah.
It demystifies the whole thing. But she was terrific. It's funny. I have a picture in the other room of she and I in the dressing room together while I was doing the bit. And yeah, that was really fun. It was a fun time.
That's something I'm going to carry forward now. They fat too, so I don't get nervous anymore in my interviews.
Right?
Yeah, I've got DDP next week, Diamond Dallas Page, and I know I'm going to be starstruck. So I'm like, yeah, he farts too.
There you go. He farts too.
Awesome. So, in your house, so Diesel was champion after WrestleMania 11, and they started bringing in the In Your House. And like we said, for me, you're the face of In Your House, especially now with NXT bringing it back, and they've brought yourself back to kind of host them. So, how was it being basically the face of In Your House and presenting these monthly shows? And I suppose the main one was giving the house away.
Giving the house away to the kid who turned out to be a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't know back at the time, that it would have such staying power and be such nostalgia. It was just, we knew there was pay-per-view every month, and we were, that's when they really stepped it up because you remember it was the major pay-per-views and then there'd be another, but then it happened boom, 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 one after the other. So that's what I remember most. The schedule got very grueling.
Yeah.
And it was, it was a lot. But I didn't believe that, 25, 26 years later, I'd be talking about In Your House. I'm glad we are. And I think it's one of those things that does hold up. And I don't know why necessarily that is, but I think it does have some amazing nostalgia. And the matches themselves were so good that it lent a lot of credibility to the In Your House brand. And to just be part of that, I feel very, very fortunate.
Yeah, I mean, I was born in '89, so even though I started watching wrestling probably '93, me father had those tapes. For me, watching wrestling live on TV, it was the in your house era of wrestling, new generation era. So that's why, like I said, interviewing you was great, and I got so many fun memories of that era. So, and yeah, I think it's just fun in your house for me and new generation era. It's just fun, and I think that's what's
Yeah.
missing in wrestling today.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't take themselves too seriously, right? And the
Yeah.
matches were great. The pageantry was there. People were totally into it. And, when you give away a house on live television, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that kid had a little sweet deal. I think he sold the house 6 months later for like 175K. So, what an investment!
Do you know, little known fact, that house is now a Taco Bell? Little known fact, right? That pretty cool.
Awesome. So, yeah, that kid had a nice little investment. Cool.
Matt
So,
Pompaselli, I think his name was.
oh wow. So, talk about like WrestleMania fun and people not taking themselves too serious. I suppose the kliq. So, obviously, this legendary group of friends in the wrestling business. So, did you have many dealings with the kliq?
Oh yeah, obviously a lot. It was like a modern day Rat Pack, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're young. I'm older, so I would remember the Rat Pack. But yeah, no, I mean, the kliq for a while was red hot too. I mean, and if you weren't in the kliq, you were nothing. You were nothing.
Did you have any fun stories with yourself and the kliq?
None that I can share publicly.
Oh, we're not PG.
Now, there was some, stuff happened. There was a lot of bourbon under the bridge. Let's just put it that way.
Awesome. Yep. And I mean, one of the biggest names, well, of all time, and looks like Fatty has finally hung up the boots, the Undertaker. So I would imagine you had many dealings with Taker over them years.
Yeah, and as you know, when you did an interview, Taker didn't do a lot of talking, but Paul Bearer, Percy, who another one we've lost, was one of the greatest characters, and really next to Macho Man, probably the guy I was the closest to, because that voice, and that was, he was an Undertaker, in real life, as you probably know. I'm not bursting any bubble for you. You know way more about it than I do, but I one of the very specific stories I remember, and I know you asked about Undertaker, but when you have Undertaker, you have Paul Bearer. I mean, they were together everywhere, and Paul Bearer was the mouthpiece that would talk most of the time. I mean, the Taker would do his quick throws, but also a nicer guy you won't meet. When I went back, I went to Houston to do like a watch along, maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and he was there, and we just caught up, and he's just a nicest, most genuine person. Most of these guys are. That's why you're going to hear, well, doesn't Pettengill say anything bad about anybody? Well, I'm not going to make it up, right? I mean, if they were nice to me, then they were nice. So I got to tell you just this quick story with Paul Bearer, and I'm a shoot guy. I use their names. Like I don't use people's real names because when you're on camera, you never want to slip, right? I mean, that would be like the worst thing ever. So I always, man, I'm a fan. I kayfabe it all. I'm like Paul Bearer. So we're in the back, that was a maze when you're at these massive arenas. And one of the most important things was where the food was, right? So at every single pay-per-view, and it got to be a running joke, he would find me, and it would be like across, he'd see me, and he goes, Todd, where's the chicken? At every single, and it just, that voice, that was his voice, but obviously magnified when he was on camera and everything. But, oh man, I would have tears in my eyes. Do you know if they still have sweet potato? And he would talk to me. But I don't know if people will find that as funny as I did, but I'm crying just thinking about it now. It was funny.
Part of this channel, and it was the original concept. So we're working our way through the 90s, reviewing every WWE pay-per-view. And coming up, I think we've got like WrestleMania 9 coming up quite soon. So your debut, coincidentally. And we were talking about The Undertaker and Paul Bearer, and one of my fellow guest hosts does the Paul Bearer impression. The way he said it, we all just corpsed. We all just flat out laughed for literally 5 minutes. We couldn't stop. So yeah, it's amazing. It's just that it's not like we're making fun of the voice because we love the voice and the way he's done it, but it's just because we love Paul Bearer so much. He's such a fan favorite from everyone, and clearly from yourself and the locker room.
Absolutely, what a great guy.
Awesome. So, but yeah, I suppose speaking of Taker, so going back to him, so Wrestler's Court. So I'm hoping you was lucky enough that you never had to be part of it, but was you?
Yeah, I didn't want any part of anybody back there.
Great. And I suppose one of the main stars during this time as well, and unfortunately her life has kind of gone down a little bit, I suppose, Sunny, and it seemed like looking on the cameras and TV, seems like the two of you had a great relationship and friendship. So was that like how it was when she came along?
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of those things where, I don't think it's a secret that I worked with Stephanie Wyan, and really a
Hmm.
good person, but we never really had that
Click,
chemistry.
yeah.
She was great and we got along fine and there was no drama or anything, but with Sonny it just seemed to click. And you can't explain that. I've worked with a lot of people in my career, and with some it clicks and with some it doesn't. That doesn't mean you don't like each other and you don't do the best job you can, which we did. But yeah, with Sonny, it was she again. She didn't take herself too seriously, and it's sad when people have peaks and valleys in their life, but we all do.
Yeah.
And it's very different when you lead such a public life, and when that happens, everybody has to know it, and it becomes one of those things that's out there. But she's a good person with a great heart.
Yeah. I think people kind of forget like how popular she actually was. She was like a superstar during them days.
Oh, absolutely massive.
And I mean, I suppose we'll talk about it. I was going to leave it till we went more to the attitude stuff, but the Fondle Me Elmo sketch on the Shotgun Saturday Night, it was you in the costume, am I correct?
No comment.
Cool. And something that was fun, the 1996 Slammy Awards and your opening song medley. And I watched it again today, and it looked like you was just having such a blast on stage.
Yeah, I had a great time, and that was another thing where nobody really knew what I was going to say, and they all took it really well. Everybody took it really well. I'm not the greatest singer in the world, but I had fun doing it, so it didn't really matter.
Oh, neither is Vince McMahon, but it didn't stop him in the 80s.
That's true.
Get back. Cool. So, and another guy from the 80s, you could say, who kind of made a brief return during this point as well, was the Ultimate Warrior as well. So, many dealings with Jem Helwig. I know there's been a lot of stuff lately now with the A&E documentary Dark Side of the Ring. What was your dealings with the Warrior?
Not a lot.
No.
I didn't get to know him very well, but obviously a major star, and the crossover was very, very short time that we were both there. I mean, I interviewed him several times, but with most of the guys, you'd have a rapport, but we weren't really around each other long enough to develop that.
Hmm. It's funny enough, you mentioned earlier with Owen, and there's the rule that you're not allowed to put your hands on the interviewer. So when I spoke to Shawn Mooney, similar situation at WrestleMania 6, I believe, and instead of like forcing him down, like Warriors literally grabbed hold of Mooney and threw him off stage pretty much. And we actually spoke about that, and he same sort of response you gave, like you're not supposed to put my hands on me.
Yeah.
But when I was watching, I was like, man, I feel so sorry for Mooney because the size of the boy, the strength of him, it's
Oh,
like picking up a child.
well, that's the thing with those guys, their strength, they're so massive, most of them, and they don't realize, that we're not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're holding the microphone. So that's basically why that rule, that unwritten rule, was in place. You'll kill one of these idiots.
And I suppose so. This was just after WrestleMania 12, and Diesel and Razor jumped ship to uh, WCW. So, what was the attitude from the locker room when they saw like two of the biggest stars leave WWE for WCW?
I think it was one of those times where people were like, this is interesting.
Hmm.
And again, the guys had their own thing, and they weren't going to share a lot of that with us, with their reaction to that stuff. But I know people were taking notice, and eyebrows were being raised, and that got very, very competitive for a time. So, competition breeds sometimes success, right? So
Yeah.
if you're good and you're the only game in town, that's one thing. But if you're good and you have a competing rival now and you're still winning, that's even better, right? So I think it was good for wrestling, and it made everybody perform a little bit better.
Yeah. What was your thoughts on the fake Diesel and fake Razor they brought in?
Uh,
Thankfully, one of them had a career afterwards as Kane.
I know. Uh, Big guy too.
Yeah.
I think Psycho Sid was next to Giant Gonzalez, the biggest dude in real life when you're standing next to him. But yeah, I mean, those storylines I think were fun, right? Because it made fun of it. It didn't, again, it wasn't too serious, and it made fun. It was funny.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Cool. And so during this time, Shawn Michaels was the champion, and up to now, you've seen the likes of yokozuna, Bret, Diesel, and Bob Backlund for a cup of coffee as champion. So how did Shawn handle being champion? Because was it? I know he says himself that he feels like he failed. I don't know if it was because he was a bit too immature back in them days. He was a bit young, but how did you feel he handled himself as champion?
Do we still have you?
Yeah, did you hear that?
Okay. I'm sorry, it all froze up.
All right. Um, yeah, I'll ask it again. So, so one person I want to talk about is Shawn Michaels during his time as champion. And like during your time there, you saw the likes of Yokozuna, Diesel, Bret Hart, Bob Backlund for a cup of coffee as champion. So, how did Shawn Michaels compare to them? Because I think he felt like he said in his book and in interviews, he put a lot of pressure on himself, and sometimes he felt like he's a bit too immature. But how did you find him as champion?
I thought he was one of the better ones because
Mm,
he gave great interviews and he was over the top. He said what he felt, and I know looking back that he thought probably he could have handled it better, but I thought he was great. You talk about a fan favorite. I mean, people
yeah,
absolutely loved him, and he was who he was. Was he immature? I don't know. I mean, he was young and he said what was on his mind. And I don't know if there were many more popular people in the sport at that time than the Heartbreak Kid. He
yeah,
he was on top of his game physically. I mean, some of those matches, I mean, the ladder matches that were, he gave everything he had every time he stepped in that ring. And I will tell you, during that title bout, he was injured for
yeah.
many of it, for a lot of those matches. And you'd never know it, man. When he got in there, he gave 110%, which is, something I really admired. But one of my favorite guys to interview, he always gave you something, always. So did Stone Cold, but there was guys that always gave you something,
Yeah,
and he was definitely on top of the list.
yeah. And I mean, he was champion for a lot of the In Your House today, same as Diesel, and one of my favorites. And so is a lot of people I've spoke to today who's got some fan questions for you. But your intros for the In Your Houses with that like dramatic music behind it, and the way you'd be like, this is the day where Shawn Michaels becomes a man, said the boy toy. How much fun did you have like doing these intros? Because they was like straight to the point, but they were so good.
Oh, they were great. Yeah, I mean, it's the pageantry of it, right? And it's
Yes.
the evolution of it. And I get chills just thinking about it. Like when you
Yeah.
say the music is there and you're setting the stage. So it's so great. I mean, it was so great.
Awesome. And someone else who came into the company, and for a lot of people, it seemed like they felt like he started to bring in the attitude. So Goldust, and I mean, such a character. So, and I've heard he was hilarious backstage. So, fun
Hilarious.
stories on. I can imagine you've got a few fun stories with Dustin or Goldust.
Yeah, I mean, he again, you don't take yourself too seriously. And when you come with a character like Goldust in the 90s, right?
Yeah,
If you were to come out with a character like that now, nobody would
I know.
blink an eye. It wouldn't
No.
mean anything. But that's why Vince was so brilliant, because he'd come up with these characters that were way ahead of their time. And you had to be pretty comfortable in your own skin to play
Yeah,
right? Not an easy thing to do. And Dustin was. But hysterical. Some of the things that happened backstage were way better, but you couldn't ever air them on TV. And there were some interviews that we couldn't even get through, where we were either laughing or, he said something that just went, oh boy, I don't think we can do that. But really an amazing character, well ahead of its time.
Yeah. And 1997 was such a transitional year, and a lot of them attitude era aspects started coming into the company. And the biggest storyline at this time was the Hart Foundation for America storyline. So how was it seeing Bret being, because for me, Bret was always this beloved baby face, especially like 92, 93. And now, I mean, over in the UK and in Canada, he was still a baby face, but in America, he was a heel. So how was it being part of this storyline and seeing it organically grow?
It was strange because you're right. For so long, Bret's the good guy, right? He's a baby, and you expect it, and the signs are everywhere, and Bret Hart doesn't get booed, and then Bret Hart gets booed. But that again is the genius of Vince. You have to understand this is from, and Jim Ross and the writers and the people who were involved in the time, but Vince was a visionary, right? And to say, let's take one of our most successful faces ever in the history of the World Wrestling Federation and turn them. I mean, it takes guts, because who knows how people are going to respond, but it worked.
Oh yeah. What was your thoughts of the Canadian Stampede pay-per-view? Because the fans that night were wild. Was you were still with the company at the time, wasn't you?
I didn't
I'm not
do
sure.
the Canada. Yeah, I didn't do the Canada trip.
Right.
But the stories are legendary, because it got pretty rowdy.
Cool. So 1997. So you left after basically nearly 5 years with the company. So I know you mentioned that the grind of doing both these jobs was just getting a little bit too much. And you said at the beginning, your wife says we need some vacation time. So did you miss leaving it? I would imagine, like giving it up.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a great chapter in my life, but I wished I could have continued. It's just when they added all the pay-per-views and it became every month, and I hosted 5 or 6 different shows. So for a while there, I was doing the radio show. So I'd get up at 2:30 in the morning, and I'd do the radio show, and then I'd go to Stamford, and sometimes I wouldn't get home till 9 or 10 at night. And that was 3 times a week at some points. And we did a live Sunday show, the call-in show. So I was working basically 7 days a week for, 3 years at least. So it just got to be, too much. But I loved every minute of it and had no regrets. Wished somehow I could have continued to do it, but it wouldn't have been fair to them, because I had to miss stuff because of the radio show. So
yeah.
But now I don't. So I told them, I said, now I'm free. I'm wide open. So use me however you want.
Yeah, and like we mentioned earlier, you're doing the NXT like when they've been bringing back in your house. But I mean, I suppose money talks, and obviously we won't get into financials. But if the right offer came along, and for yourself to be, I don't know, like a monthly broadcaster or even weekly, would you be interested? Because I know during this whole time, even though it felt like you was full time in WWE, you was still part time. But if they offered you like a full time gig, what would your thoughts be on it? Would you be like, yeah, I could give it a shot? Because believe it or not, I mean, you might think your time has passed, but nostalgia is a big thing at the minute. And one of the biggest faces from the '90s, I think you would fit right in for today.
Yeah, no, I'd love to do something with them. Who knows what it is, how regular it would be, but I'd be open to all that. I think nostalgia is great, but I think if you feel like you still have something new to offer, and you're still on top of your game, you should do it. And I feel like I still have something to say, and I can add to it. If I was there just for like, oh, remember that guy, then I think it would wear thin. And that's why you go back and you do one thing and then you don't come back. But to be able to do some voice work for them, and I'm a fan, so I'm open to doing anything now.
Awesome. Right, so we're down to the final segment of the show. So we went to the interweb and we got you some fan questions. So are you ready for them?
I'm ready for them.
So, friends of the show, OSW Review asked they would like to know about Donnybrook Theatre.
Wow. Yeah, no, you talk about, again, breaking the mold. Who would think that this would work? Right?
Yeah.
But it did. It was funny. It was goofy. I mean, I don't know if you liked it, but I think it worked.
Was you disappointed that it didn't get picked up for many more episodes and it only really no.
I think the decision was the correct one.
Fair enough. Cool. At Wrestling Bios asked, was you a Bret Hart guy or a Shawn Michaels guy?
I was the announcer guy, so I didn't have, you know what I mean? I had to play it down the middle. We try not to be the story. When the announcer becomes the story, or they're like, oh, this guy likes Shawn Michaels, or this guy, then how do you do an interview? Right? Because they'd say, oh, so I played it right down the middle. Personally, I liked them both, so I didn't have a dog in that fight.
What was your thoughts, expanding on that? What was your thoughts on the Montreal Screwjob? Because obviously it's it's the most infamous moment in wrestling history, possibly. So what was your thoughts when it happened? Because it happened, must have been literally weeks, or if not a couple of months after you left.
Yeah, no, again, not being there, but certainly hearing about it, and, sort of a mind bender, but I don't know. I try to be Switzerland on it. Yeah.
I've got a group of friends, and there's the one guy, Sam, and we call him Switzerland because he's always neutral in everything. So, at the Demo Gods 1 asked, is there any fun Shane McMahon stories?
Well, Shane was really getting involved when I was there. And to his father's credit, he put him in every department in the company. And Shane, to his credit, worked his way up in every single department. So it just wasn't like, here, you're a producer now. It didn't happen. He worked in marketing, he worked in advertising, he worked in, digital, he worked in merchandise, he did all of that stuff. And he was an interesting kid. I say kid at that time. He had the chops for it. He had the sort of same angles, I guess, that his dad had. I mean, if you're being raised by, Linda and Vince McMahon, you have the ability, and their daughter was the same way, Stephanie, but they were raised in the business. So it was a natural for them to evolve. I don't know if I had any funny Shane stories. He was a serious dude. But I never had any bad blood or anything like that. My time there was so drama free. It's ridiculous, because when you hear from people, you always want to find out behind the scenes, and was there any drama? Really wasn't. It was a great place to work, and I got along with pretty much everybody. I mean, I know Jim Cornette maybe didn't like me or something, but I always liked him. I don't think we had any heat.
All right. I didn't know he had heat with you, to be honest. But yeah. But cool. So next question from Jason Godfrey. What did it feel like knowing that Stone Cold Steve Austin was about to be the biggest star in WWE?
It was easy to tell it too.
Yeah.
His interviews, like I said earlier, always gave you something, and just an absolute natural talent. Obviously, he's made movies and he's done, transcended the sport. The Rock has transcended the sport. there are guys that are able to do it. You know, John Cena, like him or don't like him, transcended the sport. So Austin was one of those guys who was always prepared, always prepared. Sometimes you'd have a guy, you know, you were waiting backstage to do an interview, and they'd be like, all right, we're going to do this, this, and this, right? I said, yeah, I'll lead you to every, you know, because that's my job, right? They have 800 things on their mind. I have to set it up. Austin, just, hey, Todd, ready to go. Let's do this. Boom, knock it out. So he was, you know, the whole swagger and the whole, just an A-class talent all the way.
Awesome. And a question from Taylor Johns. He said he loved you on Livewire, and he thought you was great on it. And he seems like he wants to ask, did you enjoy it? Because he knew Fat JR didn't enjoy it so much.
I did. I mean, again, we're taking live phone calls, right? We're talking to fans. That's what it's all about to me. I mean, I think we need more of that now, more engagement. You know, with the superstars would be cool, because now in the time of social media, I mean, there wasn't any of that stuff back then. But now, can you imagine? I mean, you can bring people right into the living room and talk to the superstars one-on-one, which I think would be very, very cool. But that was Vince and the vision of, let's talk to the fans. Let's get the fans involved. Not an easy show to do, because when you're live and then you're on a tape delay and somebody would call and swear and you'd have to, you know, dump it. But it was it was a fun show to do.
Awesome. And I mean, you mentioned Cornette. I know you've done a few live wire shows with him and Sonny. So how was your relationship with Cornette? Because I didn't know there was any beef between you, if any.
No, I didn't think there was any beef, but I think he might have resented that I wasn't a wrestling guy, because he's a wrestling guy. And that's all it was. There wasn't any personal animosity or anything. But I think he just, you know, and I wasn't. That's true. But I think there was a place for what I did, because it let everybody sort of in, and you didn't have to know exactly every move and the origin of every move. But I think that's all it was, where he was a pure, true wrestling guy, and maybe the fact that I wasn't. But yeah, we never had any heat, you know, on camera or any. He was always nice and, you know, backstage and everything. But that's all I meant by that. I don't think that, you know, it was, if he had to pick somebody of his to be interviewed by, it probably wouldn't be me, because I'm kind of an idiot.
Right. And the final question from Podfather Mags. What's the funniest rib that's been pulled on you or involved you?
Boy, again, you have to remember, back in those days, we were kind of off limits.
Yeah.
You know, there was the Owen Hart one was, you know, pretty massive. But boy, other than that, I can't really think of any major. There were travel issues.
Right.
There was somebody canceled my flight one time, which they thought was hysterical.
Do you have any? Because he's become a fan favorite on the pay-per-view reviews. Rene Goulet. Did you have much interactions with him?
No, only in passing.
Right.
There really wasn't too much.
Cool. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, Todd. Like I said, I've been a massive fan of yours for such a long time, and yeah, absolute privilege. I think you're actually my 49th interview, so you just missed out on the big 5-0, but yeah. So, but yeah, this has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. But before we do go, tell everyone where they can find you, and if you got anything to plug away.
Yeah, I'm just Todd Pettengill on Instagram. It's pretty much the only one I do. I don't mess with all the other ones. It's exhausting to try to do social media. But yeah, I run a recording studio in Texas, and you know, having a lot of fun doing that, and looking forward to going back and doing some stuff with the WWE. And it was really fun to do the show, man. I appreciate you reaching out. I'm still surprised anybody even remembers me, but it was a lot of fun. I appreciate it, man.
Well, I'll be honest, Todd. Some of my top 3 favorite interviews. Obviously, Mean Gene is number 1. We can all agree on that. He's the greatest. But you and Shawn Mooney in me 2 and 3. So it's always been you. You're in me top 3. So the fact you give me your time, absolute pleasure.
I appreciate it, brother. Good luck with the show. You're doing great.
Right.
Hey, James here. Thanks for checking out this interview. Hope you enjoyed it. I know that I did. It was a great time talking to Todd. And announcement for next week's interview, which is our 50th interview. So before I announce it, I want to say thank you to every single one of you who's checked out the previous 49 interviews. If you said to me just over a year ago you would have been doing 50 interviews, I wouldn't have believed you. And to say a big thank you to all of you, I've got a big treat. So coming to the show, one of the biggest stars of the 90s, Diamond Dallas Page. Great time talking DDP. Pleasure and a privilege to speak to this man who I was a big fan of growing up. Talk about him joining WCW, hitting the Diamond and Cutter on Scott Hall, all the backstage shenanigans, what's happening during the Nitro years, and all the great work he's been doing these days, DDP-wise. So great chat talking to DDP, and yeah, hopefully you just come back to check it out. And if you just want to, please hit that subscribe button. I'm not just saying it, it really does help the channel out. If you go on YouTube, subscribe, like, tap the bell icon, leave me a comment, always helps. If you're listening on podcast form, same again, subscribe, 5-star rating, leave us a comment, always helps us out, it really does. Bigger the show, bigger the audience, and hopefully I can deliver bigger guests and get you bigger stories. And if you want to follow me on social media, please, on Twitter, at 90s Wrestling Pod, and on Instagram and on Facebook, at 90s Wrestling Podcast. Give us a follow, I'll follow back. If you want to ask me any questions about the show, if you're a new podcaster yourself and you're looking for some advice and getting your feet into podcasting, please hit me up. I would love to give you advice. So everyone, till then, I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.